Okay, good. We're starting. Okay, well, I will get us started officially calling this to order. And I assume that all of you had a fairly good day today. It's been interesting to watch the weather change a little bit. So, and I assume that you had a chance to look at the minutes. And is there any additions or corrections? Fortunately, we have Heather who is doing the minutes, and she's taking it from the from the recording. So it's pretty it's pretty accurate. Let's put it that way. Anybody have any additions or corrections? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion
Somebody?
to approve.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a motion to second to approve the minutes?
I
Anybody?
motion to second to approve.
Thank you. All right, thumbs up if you approve. Okay, I do need your video on if you are doing that. Okay, I think we're okay on that. Okay, so let's see, sharing screen. I think the person that we need next is actually not here yet. Let's see. Do one person at a time. For some reason, it's not letting me share screen. Can you guys see the screen? I don't think so. You can't see my screen. There we go. I think we got it. Okay.
It doesn't look like you're sharing, but you do have permission to do so.
Yeah, I know. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. I was trying to get multiples.
I can see it now.
You can see it now. There we go. Okay, can you see that?
We're
just seeing
this is important, so take a look.
We're seeing the launch meeting Zoom part of your browser.
Ah, you're not seeing the good part. Okay. Let me get rid of that one. No. Okay, let's try this one again.
There we go.
Can you see it? Yes, I see a few smiles. Okay. This was sent to me by a friend today, and I was thinking, yeah, this is kind of it. So, okay. Let me get back to this. Can you guys still see this or not?
Nope.
Nope.
Not now.
All right, let me try again on this thing.
Yes.
You can see it now.
The
Okay.
agenda.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things, Blake has volunteered to be a co-chair with me, but I need to get it, see if you guys are okay with that. The idea being that with two of us doing it, and it would get someone else who get another input on this. So anyway, is there any discussion on this?
I'll add, Beth, my thought was that you have graciously chaired this committee for years. And I'd like to offer to help out, whether that's a co-chair or in any way that would be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. And Blake has been part of this group for many years, so he's pretty familiar with the process. And so is there any, what I need right now is a motion to approve that, to approve Blake being the co-chair? From somebody?
Motion to approve.
Thank
Amanda,
you.
motion to approve, yeah.
Okay, second.
Second from John.
Thank you. Okay, I need thumbs up from everybody. If you're okay with that. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, and then Heather Gooch is going to be our recorder, so she's graciously volunteered to do that, which really helps. So those are just kind of some of our our basic type stuff. Okay, so Sheldon, you're going to be going over some of the assessment data, and I'm going to turn off my share screen and you can put yours on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Bev, and thank you, Blake, for volunteering. That's great. We appreciate everybody's being here and taking your time. This presentation is same presentation that Ruby did at the board meeting. So if you observed the board meeting, I hate to bore you, but the other time is that it's important that this group sees it as well. And also that we can dig maybe a little deeper and you can ask some more questions on it in this format. So some of it I'm going to go through fairly quick, and John's going to address some of the specifics to the elementary later in his plan. So we just want to get your input and the depth on that. And then also from this information is we do have Esser dollars that we can use for the next couple of years, and we want some input on that. And I have some surveys that I'm going to send out to different groups, and I'd like your feedback on that as well as you see what we need to do, and feedback on what surveys or what we may need to ask. So that's sort of my agenda today. Does anyone have any questions or things before we start?
Gentlemen, it's Blake. Thank you. Do you mind just telling me what are Esser dollars?
Yeah, these are the federal dollars that the federal government sent to us to mitigate things for COVID and COVID learning loss and everything else. So it came in kind of 4 different sections in different ways. So first we had what they called the CARES Act, which was this immediate buy sanitizer, buy whatever you need to do to get running. That was pretty short term and pretty quick. Then we had Esser 1, which allowed for us to, what kind of learning, what devices do you need to buy to make sure that kids can learn at home because we're remote learning. What training do you need? You have to buy Zoom licenses for everybody, and those sort of things, or those immediate things of how we transition early. We started our RLA program, our Remote Learning Academy, with that money. We hired the teachers, bought the curriculum, all that kind of stuff was in that involved. And then Esser 2 kind of extended that to keep it going, and also summer schools, tutoring. Extra bus drivers, all that kind of stuff that we did to try to create as many learning opportunities under a difficult situation, and continued buying sanitizer and wash stations and all that kind of stuff. So anything deal with COVID, dealing with the operational of COVID, new learning models that we had to develop, a new training that we had to do, adding staff, more nurses, more tri-senior trackers, all those sort of things was involved in that. And we're still working on Esser 2 right now. We've been very fortunate of how we're using that. And we haven't tapped into Esser 3. Esser 3 is a little bit different because we are in such emergency on the other ones that they really, use it now. Now with Esser 3, they're saying, okay, how are you going to make up for the loss of learning, social emotional needs, all those sort of things for the next 2 years, right? And so 20% of Esser 3 has to be directly linked to learning loss. And you have to have, interventions that are research-based and doing that. But that can be tutoring, that can be summer school. We had a great summer school with great results last year, which was a different Esser, which we put in for a grant for. I know this is probably confusing, but bottom line now is that we have, and it's a lot of money, we have approximately $2,100,000 to use before September of 2024. And so we want to have input of how we need to use that money to address the loss, right? We have, some of that money right now we're using to pay for RLA and RLA teachers still. Which if we do that for another year, I'd have to use Esser 3. If we continue our summer programs, I'd use Esser 3 for some of that. We developed increased our ELD teachers and our community liaisons to make sure that we have that support there as well. We have some mental health information, things that we're using as well. New curriculums, all that kind of stuff. We can develop into that program, as well as keeping our technology going and so on. So that is what it is. So all the others was to get us through COVID. Now what can we use this new money for, to continue to make sure things are safe and ready, but also create opportunities to make sure that our schools are doing what they need for the future for 2 years. The problem with it is that it is only 2-year money and it runs out. So if you buy people and it drops off, you have to have some kind of transition plan. It's one-time money, but it is for a couple years. So how do we blend that into immediate need, and also how it blends into the future?
Can it be
Thank you.
used for capital?
What's that?
Can it be used for capital? Any type of improvements to the building, or?
It can be used, and we have looked, and we've got some bids on it. And I'm also looking for a different grant for this, but like filters, HVAC systems, right? COVID-oriented type things. If you could link it to COVID, they're really a lot more strict now on COVID-3 on that. But yes, there are some capital improvements with air quality, and you know, you could. It's really, really difficult, but you could like even buy a bus if you had to do another route because of too many kids. But that's not really an issue anymore. But then you have to say, if it's depreciated over 10 years, you can go 20% and all this other stuff. So there are ways you can do capital. Esser 1 and 2 was a lot easier. This is a lot more difficult to do Esser 3 into capital. But if you can pay for some other things, then it frees up capital that you can use for other things. And so there is some ways that you know, we can pay for our ELD teachers and some of those things, our remote learning and those things, which frees up other money that can be freed up for capital. So it's kind of a give and take on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sheldon, I think you were doing.
I can
go
do the
ahead
other
with
ones
the
for
next part
2020.
too.
Yeah. My sharing things disappeared. Oh, there we go. You guys see that?
Yep.
All right. Let me. I think I forgot to do this last time, and I apologize. So anyway, so this was the district's presentation to the board on October 25th, and it basically goes through our complex assessment system. During COVID, we didn't know week to week what we were going to be doing, or in and out, and even the state didn't decide and get federal permission, and they changed how the state did testing as well. So it is an important, and there is testing in all areas, but it is a little bit hodgepodgey, I would say, at most. So, but the state was able to, and from our district assessment, to give us some achievement and some growth scores. So we're very happy about that. We were really looking forward to some of those things because we feel like we're doing some good things to improve, and wanted that information. So at the district level, we used what we call NWA, or MAPS, Northwest Evaluation Association, which we've been using this for about 7 years. It's a very national-wide, national norms. Millions of kids take it, and it basically rates how you're doing, same kids, the same kids sort of thing. And so it gives you some national norms, and then you see how you're doing with those national norms. For the most part, we was able to take math grades to 2nd through 10th grade, reading grades 2nd through 10th, and science 6 through 10. Again, sometimes this was hard because they didn't have necessary rules on how to do it remotely and not remotely, and some schools did it that in the nation did it differently. Timing of when we had quarantines and fires and stuff threw this sort of out. You can do it 3 times a year. We wasn't able to do it in all grades 3 times a year. And there probably isn't value to do it 3 times a year. It's probably 2 times a year is better, but we were just trying to get us in when we could for the best information we could have. And then K through 3 uses a dynamic indicator of basic early literacy, or DIBELS. This is another national test, and it measures phonetic awareness, fluency, and accuracy, as well as some comprehension. So that's the district assessments that we use that are nationally normed. You know, a lot of things to take into consideration is, you know, classroom instruction, avoid testing fatigue, work with limits of scheduling during COVID pandemic. I mean, you know, when we're trying to get kids in here, how much time do you take on taking national norm tests? And then we had to make some decisions there. And also just where we were in each building at the time. So in the elementary, we have spring data. We took the maps and DIBELS in the spring. In the middle, it was better for them to take the winter data. And in the high school, they took spring data for this. So therefore, our growth data for the elementary was fall to spring, and middle school is fall to winter. Just because they sort of ran out of time in the spring. So there are different ways that we look at this, and we're trying to do, of course, now do this more consistently. But last year that was really difficult, worrying about where kids were in their emotional state as well. It's state assessments. The state assessments, the state asked for a waiver for the national government, and they got, again, they were worried about testing fatigue and trying to test kids in and out and kids on remote learning and all that kind of stuff. And so they reduced the amount of testing that they did. Still the same tests, they just did not administer it to all grades at the same level. So usually all grades 3 through 8 take both the math and the English language arts test. This year they chose grade levels to do that. So 3rd grade took 3, 5, and 7. Math took 4, 6, and 8. We only have growth scores. Again, we did not take 2020 tests, and 2021 tests were limited, so growth scores are really hard to do, but they did come up, use 2 years data to come up with some growth scores for 5th grade and 7th grade and 6th grade and 8th grade with their relative tests. The high school did take their PSATs and SATs. We have achievement for that. And our access tests actually were taken in January, so we were able to do some of that data at a little more normal level. Any questions on any of this? Again, we could go through this. This is how they're normed and how MAP uses growth data. They take basically where kids are when they take the test first and compare them to exactly, if you get a 210, they say, how much should you grow before the spring? And how did all the kids grow, and take a mean of that. And then they compare it to how we grow on that. So it's just a normative test and gives you an indicator of how your students are growing compared to similar kids taking similar tests across the nation. This kind of talks about how that measurement scale works. Norm testing is its thing in itself, but it is a good indicator of how kids grow and move and go forward, of where they should be compared to other kids. It's a one point in time, but it is an indicator of how you're doing compared to other kids in the nation on this particular test. This is part of the DIBELS test, and this is how they look at it, is, you know, are we making typical progress, above typical progress, well above typical progress, below, or well. And this is a 5-point range, and it's called the Pathways to Success. And again, there's all the data behind here that we can send you this link, and you can look at how this is decided and go forth on that. So that's the things that we were looking at. Also, what was different last year is that throughout the state, there was a lot of students that did not participate in the tests. If you were doing ROA, let's say, all over the state, you did not have to take the test. You didn't even have to waive out of it. Some people waived out of it. Some kids were on quarantines during the tests. There's all kinds of situations. Some schools just did not take them. There was schools that had 2% participation in the tests. There was other schools that didn't. We did a very good job of taking the tests. And we have pretty good numbers on those. The 9th and 10th grade in math are a little bit low because the NWAK or MAPS test is basically Algebra 1 and geometry, or if you're above those, if you're a ninth grader in geometry or Algebra 2, you wouldn't take this test because it wasn't really relevant to you. And we have a lot of kids that are advanced in math that didn't take the test. So it wasn't that we didn't have the test, it was just that it wasn't really relevant because we're looking at where the kids need to grow. And if they're already past where they needed to grow, we didn't bother to take them out of Algebra 2 to be able to do that. So that's why their numbers are a little bit lower. But we had pretty good participation rate considered that we were in COVID. Reading participation across the board was very, very decent. And Dibbles, of course, we made sure we got every student in those grades. So feeling pretty good about that. And there's the science participation rates. This is a really big factor when states start looking at us is, how many kids and which kids took the test, right? Which kids were left out, who decided to do that, and was it demographic, equitable across all groups who was not taking the test or who was taking the test, and that's a big factor. So this shows the RIT scores, and the RIT scores is like the norm, the average for all the schools taking it throughout the nation. And you can see that, again, there's a pretty high standard deviation, especially during the COVID of this. And we're always within the standard deviation. We didn't necessarily meet all this as far as the actual number that they went through that the kids got, but we were within the standard deviation with that in math, and ninth grade was a little bit above. But again, higher than we have been, and also it did give us a good indication that we're close to on track with that, but not where we want to be. I mean, there's work to definitely do there, and we want to be there. Okay, and that's actually the RIT mean, right? And here's the reading, and we're a little closer in the reading all through the system. Again, work to be done, but all within the RIT score and all within the standard deviation. In science, we've always been way above in science. We do very well in science. As you can see that we're significantly in every grade level above in science. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but it also shows what our kids are capable of doing. And I think that's important to note as well. So very excited about the science scores.
Sheldon?
Yes, ma'am.
They've released scores and standards for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And they've done some studies on that. Is there a reason that we haven't started taking a look at those?
Far as, what do you mean? What?
For math? So
For
you,
maps?
yeah,
I don't know. I would have to look at that. It was a choice that the building made, and we'd have to look at that. But I mean, that's something that possibly we could do. Yeah. I
Okay.
know that. Yeah. They felt at the time, and when they were doing NWA, that they felt that it wasn't valuable, and most schools don't do it above 9th or 10th grade, and Algebra 2, most don't give the test, so the numbers are a lot lower. I know that at one time. Now that could change, especially during COVID. People would want that information, so they might have some good data there. We could definitely look at it.
okay, because in my old district, we did that when they came out with their norm data for that.
Yeah.
When they came out with the Common Core, they started looking at that at course levels in addition to grade levels as they started moving up.
Okay, that's something definitely to bring up to the team. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Only because I'm a math nerd.
Right. No, that's good. I mean, we'd love to have that information. Yeah.
Okay.
And here's your.
I have a question too, Sheldon.
Sure.
The kids in the past have been, at least at the middle school, have been setting goals for themselves. When COVID hit, were they still doing that?
Yeah, they were. And also there is a little bit difference there too, is that actually the middle school are winter scores and the others are spring scores. Spring scores has a larger group. So therefore they're more accurate in the middle, and only certain schools take the winter one. So there's always a little thing there. I don't know if they're better or worse, but there is an asterisk there. But they have set some goals. I'm not sure to what extent last year. It's a little harder to do that one-on-one when you're not in school all fall. But I know that they do use those RIT scores to guide their instruction and let the kids know where they're at. So yeah, there definitely was some goal setting. I can't say it was 100% across the board. It could have been, but yeah, that's something to do. If there's no school teacher, they may know that here. So wasn't anything that we required under COVID, but I assume that they did it still.
Our middle school teachers aren't here right now. They'll
They
be
have their own
late.
meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
So and here's some growth to parent congressional norms. Again, not where we want all the time, but it is within the standard deviation. These numbers are very small. You can see 2 to 4, so it looks like there's huge gaps. There really aren't that huge of gaps, but there are some work to do there in some areas, but also some things that show that we did some good work. So and you can break those down. And there's the reading.
Are these with cohort groups, the growth?
Growth is compared to, yes, basically what you want cohort groups is, yes, if you scored a certain score, they're measuring you to those other students of that same score, right? And see how you grew compared to others. And we were within standard deviation. You can imagine there's a large standard deviation in that goal because there's a lot of different circumstances, right? But yes, that is measured of similar kids to similar kids throughout the nation. And there's dibbles on their pathways to north. Remember that this is state and this is where we were. And as you can see, that actually we had some better data during COVID than we did before. So that's some good improvement of some of our instruction we're doing and some of the curriculum I think that we've picked. And that's a big thing that we wanted to watch is are we improving? And to improve during COVID, I think shows that we have a lot of potential there to do more. So that's pretty exciting.
Do we know which of the kids are need the most assistance there to be?
Yeah. Oh, yes, it's all by individual student, and individual even dictates what the areas they're strong in and what areas they're weak. Yeah. Yeah. In science, we again blew it out of the water. But yeah. Participation on the state test, like I say, this was a really varied throughout the state. We did very well, and not only do they look at how you participated overall, but again, who participated. Our students in all areas participated at a fairly high level, and all groups participated at a fairly high level. Our free and reduced lunch kids participated at a higher level than our non-free and reduced lunch kids. Our minority students participated at a higher level as well. So we had a good cross section of our students taking the test. It wasn't pick and choose. We have a fairly good representation. Here's Cmas compared to the mean score. Again, academically and the mean scores, we're not where we want to be. This is English language arts for 3rd grade math. So math would be naturally lower than English language arts throughout the state and also for our school. Again, met standard deviation, but not where we want to be. But had some fair. We're getting closer actually to meeting the state mean on Cmas, but still some work to do there, and that's one of our big goals. PSAT and SAT. Again, we normally in the 11th grade and SAT are above the national norms and state norms. This would be state norms, not national norms, but state norms. And we did that as well. But again, this gives us ideas of what we need to work on, where we're weak on, what we need to do. And so we can start developing and programming to meet the gaps to make sure they get there. And some of these are testing. I think we had 15 at one time. So yeah, that can be something as well. So someone needs to say something. Okay. This is where we're most excited. It was about growth, how we're growing on the state test. This is a state test. It's not our own district test. This is actually the Cmas. And as you can see, these are the state, how they're growing and how we grew. And we're really excited about all of those with how much growth that we had. Our students are growing at a higher rate than most kids at the state. And so eventually we'll get to those academic marks, as I showed you before, where we're not quite at if we continue our growth progression, and especially hopefully if we're in school more often, that growth rate will increase. We need to have that growth rate increasing because obviously we're not where we want to be on the norm, on the medium score. So again, almost growing twice as much in 6th grade math as other 6th grade math students in the state. And this is all students. So that was great news for us. And here's our different groups. Not only are our kids growing, but all of our groups are growing. Our minority and non-minority groups are growing at a higher or equal to rate than the state. Except a little bit here and a couple points. So that is really good news as well, and that's in the elementary. And there's similar things in the middle school. In the middle school, we don't have growth scores for the high school because they can't compare the growth from 2 years ago from Cmas to SAT, PSAT. So they did not do growth scores for the high school. The state was unable to come up with anything that they felt were valid. But again, you can see in middle school that all of our groups are performing at performing at levels that are above the state average during the last year. So we're excited about where that could possibly go as we move forward. Again, here's 16, 17, 18 to 19, 18, 19 growth, and then 18, 19. This is a 2-year gap because we did not test in 2020, but you can see that we have good growth in most areas, even with COVID and going over 2 years. So we feel like we're headed in the right direction and doing some good things. And not that we're going to live on those laurels, because a lot more we need to do, definitely. But with changing some curriculum, changing our instruction, changing how we evaluate kids, I think that even with the conditions that we had of in and out of school and fires and everything, we were still able to show some pretty good movement and some growth. And so I have high expectations for this year. This is WITA, which is our English language test, how fast our students are moving to fluency in our access growth percentile. And we struggled a few years ago. We've put a lot of effort into building this. And as you can see, our growth rates are a lot better, have moved up to the state level and exceeded the state level. And we're still developing that program. So definitely, and I think because of this, it's showing in our other scores as well. If we have our students better acquisition of a second language and faster is another thing that we have. We used to get them, but our test scores wouldn't be until the middle school. Now we're getting that information out earlier, that we can have our other test scores will increase as well, because they have be more of a level playing field if we can increase the growth in our English acquisition over time. So, and we feel really proud about what we've done there, and we still have a lot of work to do there as well, but we have made some significant changes to improve that and stuff. So any questions or ideas, or want some more information?
On the WIDA, what grades participate in that one?
I don't know if K does, but it's pretty first through 12. So
Okay.
you go through it and you work on it until you exit out of it. We just had a graduation last week of kids that have exited out of it. You can exit out of it in 2nd or 3rd grade. I'm not sure when they exactly started, but definitely, as you acquire the acquisition of language, you can exit out of it, you graduate basically, but we still monitor because we don't want you to slip back. We want to make sure we're right and make sure that you have the resources you need to be able to handle both languages, which is a very impressive feat. So.
And I know with language, and I can't remember with WIDA, it's been too long since I've been involved with that. But with acquiring a new language, there's conversational language where you where you learn in the first couple of years, but it takes a while to develop the comprehension language that's needed for higher level academic.
Yeah, and that's one thing that it measures as we go through, and something that we put a lot of focus on is understanding the academic language. We have a lot of great people bilingual in conversational language, but academic language is a whole different thing. And as you can see with our improvement there, that's something that definitely we're focused on and still are. We've just working on buying a new curriculum for K2 in language acquisition and doing a lot more direct instruction and that kind of stuff. So we overhauled the whole program because it's important, and we want to make sure that they have all the opportunities that all of our students have to learn. So and hopefully a faster pace too. So.
And so does the Access program, is it mainly conversational language that it assesses?
No, it tests basically what you need to be successful in school is what it measures. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. It takes a long time. We basically have to do those individually. And we do them all during January, and our ELD teachers do that almost full time and work through that. And then you have different levels that they move up through, and you have other evidence as well. So yeah, it's a comprehensive program, and it measures, like I say, whatever their indicators are that they think that what you would need to be successful in a school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions?
This is Amanda. So we're comparing the district for the Cmas is, I guess, where I'm asking my question on the Cmas side. We're comparing our district's mean, but for actual score mean, and then their growth over the 2-year period to what the state's average is. When you say that's what you're comparing it to.
Right.
But I know that there was a lot of loss, right, statewide with COVID and everything else. So is there anyone looking at like the actual numbers of folks like meeting the expectations or partially meeting approach, the ones that haven't yet met, like, and I know the state breaks those out in different groups too, but I wanted to kind of, it's one thing.
You think, I mean, as far as what we're looking at, I mean, we definitely look down and break it down and what those kids need in our building. I mean, that's to me, the biggest value of this whole test is not the state, is what individual kid, what does that student need, right? Where are they? And connected with the other evidence that we have, the triangular data, what does this kid need to improve? Where are their weaknesses and so on? And then as a group or a school or a class, where are weaknesses that we can work on, and instruction changes and the curriculum changes and the support changes to make sure that that kid is growing. This is the end result of that, but the most important piece is those individual students. And we definitely dig into that and identify trends in our school, trends in our classrooms, trends by teacher, and then where our student is individual.
Okay, with the goal kind of being getting them all meeting expectations, not just like where we are relative to the state mean, because if the state mean is not good, then we don't really want to be compared to that, right?
Right. I mean, that kind of gives you the overall picture, but yes, it's really about how that individual is getting where we need to go. But if you get enough kids individually, then you look better on the state test, right? You're doing a good job with all those kids. And so that's our goal, is to do well with all of them, have all of them improving, the main thing. Because of where they start school, maybe even in kindergarten, and where their background is, or all that kind of stuff. They might start slower, but still that's important, how fast they're growing and how fast can we grow to get them where they can be as fast as possible, and meeting the needs there, and doing the interventions and that kind of stuff to help them achieve at the appropriate level as fast as we possibly can, and keep them there and keep them growing. So, and keep all kids growing, no matter where they're at, whether they pass or not. We still want our students to be growing. So.
I think for
Okay.
some of you that are new, the MAPS test in particular, because it's given several times a year, is really instrumental. And the teachers drill down on each of those to get an idea of where what are the instructional needs of the individuals and the group. And I know at the middle school, the kids know their information, and so they're setting goals and trying to figure out how they can get their scores up and to help fill in those gaps. And if I remember correctly, Sheldon, they're beginning to do that, at least in the intermediate grades at the elementary school. Maybe John can address that.
And we don't really do maps, and maps are a little different K2, but they definitely use that to a certain degree, definitely to identify the needs, as well as they also do DIBELS. It also identifies it in Cmas, and then of course there and the benchmarks in collaborative classroom and our math program with Bridges, our math program as well, also gives them information of where that student is and trying to do that personalized learning to meet them where they're at and where they need. So that data was all looked at in a triangular data, and if it says the same thing, obviously it's something that we need to work on. So,
and for some of you that aren't aware either, professional learning committees that the teachers have, they look at this data and they decide as a group where are some of the things that we need to improve and how can we do it differently. So there's a lot of discussion around this data-driven instruction.
Yes, and it's a little harder to interpret this year, but we've spent thousands of hours on these little things. You would not believe what we've had to do to get this, because it wasn't there, but it was worth it, and definitely have some great information to move forward. So we had great information on individual students, but it was harder to get group information. So that's where we're looking at. So anything else that I could help clarify? And if anyone ever wants an individual information, I can make sure and get that to you, and you can come in and talk to me, or we can talk on Zoom or whatever. Please don't hesitate to be informed.
All right. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think
I can go into Esser survey real quick and then let John have it.
Go.
This is just some basic input from you. I talked about it earlier of what it is maybe, and they won't have to go in depth on that. So Esser 3, like I said before, it's a way, this is like they call the recovery, right? Other ones was survival or resources to go. This is about how we're going to recover after COVID, even though maybe COVID isn't totally over yet. It was when they funded this, but now we have still dealing with it, unfortunately, because of the Delta. But it's really about what was given to the state and then distributed to the schools on a formula. We didn't have any say in that. To safely reopen and sustain safer operations of schools and address impact of the coronavirus pandemic on students in areas such as learning loss and mental health supports. Our district, for the Esser 3, we have about $2.1 million right now that we can utilize over the next few years. These are one-time funds though, and so if you hire a bunch of people, you would have to let them go in 2 years. But there are ways that we're trying to build in things that we can help and do some blending and natural attrition. We can make some movements with that. So that is probably the kind of the trick of the situation, but it has to be spent by September of 2024. So I try to say one of the things I want is community input of what does this look like, and that's why I'm trying to get information out on our scores and that kind of stuff, and this is very valuable. So this is the survey that I'm thinking about sending out to people. We don't want to make it too complex, but what is your role? So that'll be parent, student. We're going to ask students for this information as well, and administrators, teachers, everybody. What school did you attend, or where are you employed? And then the next thing is please rank the next from 1 to 5, 1 being the most important, 5 being the least important, or where we should start addressing some of our issues. And those points are learning loss. We like to say that we didn't have learning loss. We didn't learn as much as we wanted to, but we didn't have loss. We just didn't have as much improvement we wanted to because we had some great growth. But definitely want to address that, and we have to use learning loss for their language. But what are we going to do to get our kids where we want them to be, and the interventions in all kids? How do we get them to where they could have been if we had been in school? We do understand that way been done. All kids would have been done better if they'd have been in school the whole time. So all different groups, all different experiences. We want to make sure that we are looking at that. So that's priority of that. Social, emotional, and mental well-being. Make sure that how important is that to us? We know that a lot of our students are struggling. We're seeing a lot of emotional things in our schools right now, and without having students ready to learn, it's really hard to work on some of the other things. So that's important to us. Health and safety needs, again, what can we do to have people in place to be able to make sure that kids are being healthy, that we have good ventilation systems, we have all those things in place. Again, then continuity of operations. How can we give our students the support they need in ELD and remote learning? We're going to still have students that choose to do that or need to because of health reasons or just want to. We'd like to continue that program as an option in our school, COVID not being here. So that's all those things are important. Giving support all the way through our system, and then possibly whether our technology and digital tools. Do we have the tools and the technology in place that make our kids successful? I think we're doing a good job there, but I don't think it hurts to ask. We can use Esser dollars on those, on increasing some of those things. So those are the 5 priorities that we would like people to rank. Would anyone else like to add anything to those priorities, or think we should have something on there, or something should be off that list? And also, I don't expect you to always have to talk up in a meeting on this. If you want to send me an email with your ideas, I'm more than welcome to do that. So I just want input. I don't have to do it in any certain way. So.
Sheldon, will there be examples provided for any of these 5 things? Like, for example, you mentioned learning loss, like summer school would qualify for learning loss.
Right.
But that's not apparent to me in the options. I guess for somebody who's maybe not as ingrained in what these 5 things mean, is it going to resonate with the general public?
Yeah, that might be a good thing of defining these a little more, at least have a link that people that chose to do more with that examples, what we're doing now maybe, and what we'd like to continue doing. I think that's a great idea. So yeah, that's why we need other people's eyes on it than educators. So thank you. So yeah, we can do that definitely, and put out what we're doing now maybe, and stuff that we would like to continue, and other things to look for. So yeah, we can do that for sure. That's a good idea. So. Heather, will you write that down, please, for me?
Got it.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And this is Emily. You said this is an online survey that you're sending out?
Yeah.
Small thing, but asking an or question in the second question of where do you work or what school does your child attend, you probably want to specify which answer you'd like.
Okay.
And then my other question is this going to be available to folks in other languages who don't speak English as their first language?
Yeah, so definitely be, at least in Spanish. It's so hard for us. Others will do some translation stuff, but we do everything in 2 languages. And so we'll definitely have that. And we also, like our parents even identify that we only send stuff in languages. So yes, definitely in 2 languages, but that's a good idea. We will clarify number 2 a little bit better. And
thanks.
It's number 2, I mean, people are always afraid that they're going to be found out. So we try to make those as general as possible. And we don't care. We just want information. But so we want to make it so that people don't feel like, oh, they're targeting me, or versus having the openness, but I think we can do a little better job of doing that as people still feel like they're not being singled out.
Very good.
So
Sure. Thank you for the clarification about the translation as well.
yeah. So this is, I mean, I'll be totally honest, I stole this from a couple schools in Colorado Springs and I just adjusted it to me. So, and it worked well for them. They've already went through it, but yeah, we can definitely increase it. And the last one is additional ideas for Esser funds. So people could write whatever opinion they want in there, list things that they think would be important. And I'll have a link at the top too that explains Esser funds more. They can link to and it goes through what it can be used for and what it can't be used for, and when it sunsets and all that kind of stuff as well. I have a link that I'll throw in there that kind of goes through all that as well. So if people choose to, they'll definitely be able to have information, and then also, of course, give them my number to call if they have any questions. So. Right now, we're very lucky because I had enough Esser 2 dollars to do pretty well everything I wanted to do this year. So we will be able to use it possibly in the spring, but mostly probably in the next 2 years. So that's really nice. And I'm looking for some great opportunities to do some wonderful things there and help our students. So we do have to have a narrative in, not the total budget, exactly what we're going to spend it, but what we want to spend it on by December 15th. So fairly short turnaround, but I wanted to make sure that we got everything running where we are now, so we could really look at the data and look at the information that we have, so we can make some really good choices. And we have plenty of time to do it still. So. I'm hoping that in our that I may ask for some focus groups after we get the information back too. So I may be leaning on some of you to come in and give us some feedback on the results. So if that's okay, I might send that out, and feel free to say yes or no. So.
And you are sending this, what group are you sending this to? This
is going to be really broad. It's going to be sent to all of our parents and probably all of the community even somehow, but mostly our parents, and then students, of course, our staff. We're going to do staff both in person, I mean, not in person, but in staff meetings and this survey. I mean, they'll have more than just a survey, but there'll be other information there, and our administrators. So yeah, it's pretty broad. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't want to take up too much time. If you have any individual questions, please get a hold of me, because I want John to have time to do his job. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you. Okay, so John, are you here?
I sure am. Yes.
There you are. I see you. Okay, go for it, guy.
All right. Thanks. Let me get my screen up here. Make sure that I'm projecting okay. Can folks see my slideshow here?
Yes.
All right. Great. So. Okay. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take some time here to talk about the elementary school specifically. Sheldon, of course, touched on the elementary school as well in his presentation, so there'll be a little crossover. I'll try not to, be redundant, but there definitely is some crossover there as well. And as I go along, if you have any questions, I'll try to stop a little bit throughout and see if anyone has any questions clarifying questions as they go. So to begin with, just wanted to paint a picture of demographics of the elementary school. So we all are on the same page with that. We have a total of 375 students currently at the elementary school. If you add in preschool, we're up over 400 with our preschoolers. We have a half-day preschool program, and we also have a full-day preschool program. I should have also mentioned at the outset, Erin Miller was unable to make it. She had a prearranged trip for today, so she was unable to make it tonight. So she's, of course, my colleague and being the primary principal, but I'll talk about preschool to 5th grade here tonight. So you can see the breakdown of students per grade level here. You can also see breakdown here in the middle of our English language learners in our school, which is a demographic that we do focus on in this presentation. And then also our breakdown of our RLA students, remote learning students in the elementary school right here. I'm going to talk a little bit about assessments, and this is where I hope not to be too redundant, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page with how the assessment picture has unfolded in Colorado, and then what it looks like here at the elementary school as a whole, and then also within each classroom, and some information that we look at as we're breaking down assessments throughout the school. So we use the following assessments here at the elementary school, in addition to some other ones, but these are some of the high level ones we use. DIBELS, which was mentioned before, Dynamic Indicator of Basic Early Literacy Skills. That's administered to all of our students, kindergarten through 5th grade. That is what that is that's a one-on-one assessment. So it's a teacher sitting down with a student and doing what you might call a running record. So the student is reading one-on-one to the teacher scoring it as they go. That's the short version of what DIBELS is, if you're trying to visualize what that assessment is. We do that 3 times a year, beginning of year, middle of year, end of year. That's what the BOY, MOY, EOY stands for, as you see this. And we use that to really guide us, in particular in kindergarten through 3rd grade. That's a very important assessment for us as kids are becoming emerging readers. So DIBELS. We have the MAP growth, which is the MAP assessment. That's administered to our 2nd through 5th graders. That's a computerized assessment. Sheldon talked a lot about that and sharing data there. That's an adaptive computerized assessment. So as a student is taking either the MAP reading or the MAP math test, their questions, or each child receives different questions, and the questions adjust depending upon their answer to the previous question. So the short, a basic way to think about it is, if they get this question right, the next question will be more challenging. If they get this question wrong, the next question will kind of go down a little bit in level. So it's what we call an adaptive assessment, and it's computerized. So that's MAP, measures of academic progress. Then in kindergarten through 2nd grade, those students take the MAP fluency, which is same company, but it's a different intention. That's more focused on students and reading fluency in particular. So it's a little different than the adaptive one I just mentioned with MAP growth, but it's by the same company. So we use that to drive our instruction here as well. The WIDA access is another one that is given to all of our kids, kindergarten through 5th. And that one is given in January. Usually it takes a few weeks to administer to the students, because that is a very labor intensive assessment, where it's depending upon the grade level, one-on-one or in small group administered to the kids. And that's to measure their language acquisition, English language acquisition. That's used in all schools throughout the state of Colorado to measure language acquisition. And then, of course, Cmas, Colorado Measures of Academic Success, which we've talked about, given in 3rd through 8th grade. And that's given in April, tends to be when we give that. In addition, we have many other things that we look at to drive our daily work here. Bridges is our math curriculum that we use, and Collaborative Classroom is our literacy curriculum. We have daily work, daily assessments. We have end of unit assessments. We have lots and lots of rich data coming from these areas, as well as other curriculum areas. The ones I mentioned before are more the big picture ones that help us. But we have daily student work and student samples that really drive our instruction at a higher level on a regular basis, of course. Just an example, how do we use student data? This is just kind of a, Bev mentioned professional learning communities, PLCs. I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, but this is just a snapshot of a data protocol that we might use within a professional learning community to unpack, in this case, an end of unit math test. So like I said, we use, these bridges assessments here, and then this would be the teacher work side of things. So we're breaking it down and asking ourselves, what are positive trends we see in the data? What are some trends that maybe we want to understand better? So just an example of how we use that daily data here, just a snapshot of that as well. And that's what this is too. Doing some item analysis, looking at the individual items within each quiz or assessment, and what does it mean to us in our instruction tomorrow or next week or next month, and how we need to adjust. So that was an overview of data. I'm going to jump in a little bit now, talk about school performance framework / accreditation. And you kind of hear those two things used interchangeably. SPF stands for school performance framework, and then school accreditation. Little timeline of standardized testing in Colorado that you might be aware of, going way back to the early 90s. But I'll jump up here. In Colorado, we used to administer what's called the TCAP back in 2012. That was the state assessment. And then we transitioned in 2014 to a computer-based assessment. And at around that same time, Colorado partnered with an organization called PARC, which was essentially Pearson, but a sub-organization of Pearson that helped write the assessment for Colorado, and it became computerized. And then in around 2019, technically PARC became Cmas, Colorado Measures of Academic Success. And now we refer to it as Cmas here in the state of Colorado. And it's a computerized assessment given in April. So a little bit of a timeline there about standardized testing in the state to get us on the same page. Sheldon touched on this, but here's just another way to say COVID and standard and Cmas. Back in 1920, no one took the Cmas. So that was when in March we went remote, and there was no Cmas administered in that 1920 school year. In the 2021 school year, this past school year, like Sheldon said, our 3rd and 5th graders took the English language arts. Our 4th graders took the math assessments. So a modified version of Cmas. And this coming spring, the plan is for our students to get back to the way that it has been, which is all 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders take the English language arts and math assessments, and 5th graders take the science, which is how it has been for pre-COVID. So the plan right now is that in the spring, that's the data we should be gathering for our students here. Colorado School Performance Framework, or SPF. This is the way that schools are assigned an accreditation rating. The short version of it here is that at the elementary level, they take academic achievement, which is Cmas, and they add that with academic growth, which is Cmas, and then also the WIDA access. And those two categories are combined together at the elementary level to equal the school performance framework. Now, at the high school level, they add in post-secondary readiness, which is another part of the equation. But at the elementary level, it's the Cmas and the WIDA access. And they look at proficiency and they look at growth. So that's how the SPF is calculated. Once they have the Cmas data, they put that into a formula to decide where schools fall out. And they have school ratings, and the school ratings are illustrated here. Insufficient data, turnaround, priority improvement, and performance. And when they say things like turnaround, priority improvement, that's referring to the type of school plan that needs to be written depending upon where your school falls. So we write what's called the Unified Improvement Plan that's submitted to the state every single year. Every school does, regardless of where you are. But what they call your plan and when it's due depends upon where you are in the school ratings. These are the cut scores that were from the 2019 school year. Right here, you're looking at. They change a little bit every year because of the way that the formula works. But you can see your rating was dependent upon where you fell within these percentages and within these cut scores. And this is, once again, this is the 2019. They haven't released what the cut scores will be this next go around because they're having to really kind of recalculate everything because of this learning loss and gap that we've had. So based upon these cut scores in 2018-19 school year, like I said, the elementary school had a 41.4% score, which it means that we were about 0.6% below the improvement plan rating and put us in the priority improvement plan category. So we were at 41.4% there. And once again, that was in the 18-19 school year. One thing on now, fast forwarding to right now and where we stand with this, We did take the Cmas last spring in the modified way that I talked about, with 3rd and 5th taking the ELA, 4th grade taking the math. What we found out, and when we got those scores back, is we found out that our students, the scores on the Cmas from last spring would have pushed us up into the higher category, and we would have been taken off of priority improvement if we used the 2019 metrics there. As a result, there were 11 schools that happened with, and we were one of them. Then the state had a conversation with us, and this is still ongoing right now, and this is all within the last month and a half, this conversation that we're having with CDE. And they looked at participation rate. Sheldon talked a little bit about participation rate already. Our participation rate on the Cmas was in the low 80%. I think it was averaging out about 81% or so in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, which compared to the rest of the state and Cmas last year was very, very good. Like Sheldon said, there were some districts that were like literally almost 0%. So we had really good participation rate. However, the benchmark for the state has always been 85% or above participation rate in order for any decisions to be made about your accreditation or school performance framework category. So as a result of that, the state hummed and hawed and thought about it and said, okay, you're at 81%, not at 85. So we're not going to just grant you that the move to the next category based upon the results. However, we are going to allow for you to be a part of the request to reconsider, which means that right now we've been working on over the last month or so, getting all of our local data together and submitting it to the state. And that would include primarily NWEA, MAP, and DIBELS, and saying to the state, here's our local data. You have our Cmas data. Here's our local data. Based upon our local data, does that qualify us for moving into that next category? And right now, the state said, your local data looks good, and it looks like we want to reconsider things. However, the next steps are that we will look at your unified improvement plan in a more detailed way, which I'll talk about here in a minute, just to make sure that our plan is in good shape. And then they are planning on doing a site visit on November 18th and 19th, which is just next week, to come and look at things in our building to determine whether or not we qualify to move up. So this is all really new information. The site visit, for example, we just found out about on Friday, and the UIP analysis. Our assistant superintendent, Ruby Bodie, had a meeting I think it was this morning, with someone from CDE giving us feedback on our UIP. So we have another meeting tomorrow to learn about that and how can we improve our UIP. So this is stuff I'm talking about is happening right now as we speak. So so at the end, this is all to say that when we get to a point in the next few weeks, after Thanksgiving, once we've presented to the state all the information that we have, they've had site visits, everything else, there will be a decision about whether or not we are moved out of priority improvement. So far, they've said the data supports that, but they want to come and look at us more closely because our participation rate was too low. That's the short version of it, I guess. I think I'll stop right there because I've talked a lot, and then I'll keep going. Just kind of see if there's any questions about that part of my presentation.
Hey, John, why don't you just real quickly clarify the difference between formative and summative assessments?
Sure. So Cmas is a great example of a summative assessment. So Cmas is a summative assessment would be an assessment that's given at the end of after all the learning's taken place is a one way to think about it. So Cmas is kind of the quintessential example of that. At the end of the school year, you give this assessment. Some people kind of refer to it as an autopsy because the learning has happened, and now you're giving this assessment at the very end, and it's going to, in order to make adjustments, it's more challenging because it's happening at the very end. Whereas a formative assessment is an assessment that is given maybe on a daily basis. Student work could actually be considered a formative assessment, or a quiz, or an end of unit assessment could really be used as a formative assessment, as long as we're using that information to then make adjustments to learning. So Formative is really the kind that informs us. That's the way I like to think about it, on how we can change our teaching and our learning in a very timely way, whereas summative takes place at the end, and it's a little more of a conclusion to the learning, is one way to think about it.
And I just want to add that with summative assessments like that, if you have a bad day, it doesn't always reflect what you really know. I can remember with students that got sick that day and partway through, and it can affect things.
Yeah, one of the considerations around Cmas, and well, any data we look at in our school district, period, any data, is when we have 60 to 70 kids in a class in a grade level, each student is worth 1 to 2 percentage points, depending upon, so data swings can happen in a dramatic fashion in our school district either way, positive and negative. And so that's something that we think about when we're looking at data always. I'm going to keep going along then. I don't hear any questions, but interrupt me if you do have them. So unified improvement planning. So we submit to the state every single year a unified improvement plan, UIP, and we revise it every year. And every school in Colorado does this. The timeline is what changes depending upon where you are on that, your SPF or accreditation status. So you can go to the Colorado Department of Education website. You can look up our very, very detailed UIP, which is a very large document that has all of our, breakdown of data and detailed narratives and whatnot. What I'm going to share with you here is the overview of our UIP, which includes what we call our 5 major improvement strategies that we look at here at the elementary school. So we have five of these major improvement strategies: rigor and collective efficacy, curriculum and instruction, global outcomes, culturally responsive teaching in our EL learners, and progress monitoring with PLCs. We've identified these as the large buckets that we feel will, if we focus intently on these 5 areas primarily, then we're going to continue to make the growth that we need to make in the elementary school. There's always lots and lots and lots of other things we're working on. But these are the 5 areas that we are focusing as much energy as we can on. To begin with, rigor and collective efficacy. So collective efficacy is really the shared belief that we can all collectively positively impact student achievement and outcomes regardless of disadvantages. So we all know that we have students in our school, in our classroom, in our district that that come to us from all sorts of different backgrounds, and we believe that, and it's been shown through research, that if you have strong collective efficacy and that belief that we can reach all learners, and in addition to the belief of reaching all learners, maintain rigorous expectations for all learners, then we will see learning happen at high levels. So we have rigor and collective efficacy as one of our driving forces as a result of that, because we know that if we maintain that belief, then we will see learning happening at high levels. It's oftentimes one thing with rigor that is very observable is when you walk into a classroom, you can look at student work, you can look at expectations, you can look at things that are happening in the classroom, and we can ask ourselves as instructional leaders or as colleagues, are the expectations in that classroom challenging, or are we potentially providing too much are our expectations challenging enough? And you can walk in a classroom and you can really tell that pretty quickly. So like I said, this is something that is ongoing throughout our school, and we believe that if we maintain rigor and collective efficacy, things will continue to fall into place. Some of the things that we do to make sure that we're doing this, recently we have conducted a book study called Leaders of Their Own Learning, which has to do with high expectations for students and how we can maintain those. We've done a lot within the area of personalized learning and goal setting for students. One thing that we have done this year in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade that does fall into this category is our students having student-led conferences, which provides for more ownership and more of a mindset that they are the leaders of their own learning, and they have investment in their own learning, and they can control the outcomes of their own learning. This has a lot to do with goal setting as well. I know, Bev, you've mentioned that a couple of times, and ensuring that our students are writing learning goals and we're monitoring them and sharing those. In addition to that, another way that we support rigor and collective efficacy is having our professional learning communities write goals, and our professional learning communities having these shared goals and shared collective commitments to each other as we work together as a staff. Curriculum and instruction, probably something you've heard a lot about, rightfully so, because that's pretty important. At the elementary school a few years back, we decided that we felt like we really needed to look at our curriculum, our math and our literacy curriculum. Back in 2018-19 is when was our first year of implementing Bridges at a school-wide level. And then you back up the year after, and then you come the year after that, and we implemented Collaborative Classroom, which was our literacy curriculum. So we have some students in our school right now that have had 3 years of Bridges math curriculum, and we really are happy with that that math curriculum so far. The Bridges math curriculum is produced by a company called the Math Learning Center, which is a nonprofit organization. We really think that it's a rigorous, engaging curriculum. It develops really a deep understanding of mathematical concepts, and then it also has a good basis for skill proficiency within math. It's divided. The curriculum itself is divided into 3 components within the math classroom. So if you were watching a math class, a fly on the wall during math, you would see 3 components happening. One of them is called Number Corner, and Number Corner is a time for the class to really talk out loud and share their ideas around their thinking around these math problems that they are posed with. So very conversational in nature. There's another part of there's another part of it that's called Problems and Investigations, which is really the bulk of introducing new concepts and learning about new concepts. And then the third place is called Workplaces, which is for kids to apply those concepts in sometimes a fun way that feels a little more interactive. So 3 places within 3 parts within the Bridges curriculum. The Collaborative Classroom curriculum is our literacy curriculum. If you were in our classroom during literacy, what you would see is you would see students discussing literacy. You would see foundational literacy happening at the K2 level, and then you would also see some really rich text being used in the classroom to spur on sharing of ideas and thinking. We chose the Collaborative Classroom curriculum because we really felt like it provided a broad selection of materials for our kids to use within that. The Collaborative Classroom curriculum also, as is in its name, provides an opportunity for kids to collaborate and discuss their thinking in a way that is, I think, unique to the Collaborative Classroom curriculum. And we're so far very happy with that. And I think as we've seen with some of the data we've shared, we do believe that we're starting to see the positive effects of our new curriculum that we put into place. Curriculum does take a little while to catch hold within any system. When you implement any new curriculum, let's pretend that we implement it K5. Well, our fifth graders will get it for the first year, kindergartners and the last year. So 5th graders only get 1 year of that new curriculum and then they move on. Whereas kindergartners will start with that new curriculum and have that same curriculum all throughout elementary school. So as the kids go up, we should hopefully continue to see more and more positive results based upon this curriculum, and I'm confident that we will. Instruction and instructional feedback, of course, is the other piece to this pie as well. We have curriculum and we have instruction. The teacher, and it really is our biggest factor in ensuring that our students are successful, and we're lucky to have the teachers that we do have in our school that are incredible teachers. We have provided we continue to build our ongoing instructional feedback loop within our school and our district. We have added instructional coaches We have one full-time instructional coach here at the elementary school. And then we've also built up our instructional coaching throughout the school district. We have added at the elementary school a principal, as you know, which of course the principal is a key ingredient within instructional improvement, so that we have more instructional leaders in general here at the elementary school. And our and like I said, in the other buildings in the middle school and high school, there are instructional coaches as well. So our instructional team over the last 3 years, we've gone from, kind of one instructional coach to having 4 or 5 dedicated instructional coaches throughout the district. And so instruction has really been a strong focus of ours. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is we've implemented a part of collaborative classroom curriculum, which is called SIPS, which is an intervention, or it could be used as a whole class as well, which is really focused on early phonics and phonemic awareness in the K3 level in particular. And in addition to that, all of our teachers have participated in what we call the DAAC training, which is provided by the state of Colorado. All of our teachers in kindergarten through 3rd grade have participated in that. And one other thing I just wanted to mention as well, which it's not a perfect fit in this category, is our preschool edition. This year we have added one full. We previously had 1 half-day preschool program for years and years. This year we added an additional preschool classroom. So we have one preschool classroom that's full day, and we have another preschool classroom that's half day. So we've doubled the amount of preschool services that we're providing to our community, which I think we are certainly excited about and hope to see the results there. Culturally responsive teaching and our EL learners. So we did identify 2 or 3 years ago, Sheldon touched on this as well, that we really needed to beef up our efforts around our English language learners in our school district. And we've done a lot within that category. We've done some growing our professional understanding of how we meet the needs of our EL learners is the primary area that we focused on. And in addition to that, we've also added staffing to support our ELD learners. To first talk a little bit about the staffing piece, we at the elementary school have had 1 ELD teacher here for as long as I can remember. This year we added another full-time ELD teacher at the elementary school. So we have 2 English language development teachers. We have also added, and in addition to that, we added ELD teachers at the secondary level. Over the last year and a half, we have also added 3 cultural liaisons, which allow for us to make connections with our ELD families to bridge that gap and help them understand how they can support their learners here in our school. So we really have put in a lot of efforts in this category of ELD with staffing that we're proud of. Additionally, we have done things within the area of professional learning. Some book studies that we have offered and continue to offer is 50 Strategies for Our EL Learners, Culture Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And there are some really important strategies we can use within the classroom to meet the needs of our English language learners. Almost all of them are basic practices that help all of our learners. So for example, ensuring that we learn about the background of our students and we know where they're coming from, so that, once we know that, we can also more effectively activate some prior knowledge. And when we activate prior knowledge, we can then know how more effectively to access the learning and the end for the learning for those students. Some other ways we can do that is make sure that our learning is contextual for kids that maybe are coming from a different background or a different cultural angle. Ensuring that we have resources that kids can make cultural connections to. Visuals are very important within the classroom, gestures, adjusting your speech to make sure that we're not talking too fast for our language learners. All of these things are things that are just good instructional practices, but they're even higher leverage when we have a classroom of our language learners that we are trying to reach as well. So lots of professional learning happening there that we're continuing to focus on. Our collaborative classroom curriculum that I mentioned earlier, which is our literacy curriculum, that is the book Culturally Responsive Teaching is actually one of the people that's on the board for the Math Learning Center. Her name is Zaretta Hammond. she is very focused in the world of ELD learners as well. So we felt like our collaborative classroom curriculum also supported our ELD learners really well too. Progress monitoring with PLCs. This is something I mentioned, PLCs, professional learning communities. That's a way in which we talk about how we operate as an organization. So anytime we have a team that meets regularly, we call that a PLC. And our PLCs have some overriding principles that they try to maintain as they're meeting, making sure that when we're meeting, we're talking about student learning, we're using student data to drive our conversations. And that's something that happens throughout all of our school districts. So we use the use of the word PLCs. So we want to make sure that when we are in our PLCs, we're using specific data protocols or specific protocols to unpack some of the student learning that's happening. I shared this earlier. This is an example of some work that we would have done in a PLC, which we do regularly, which is we have student assessments in front of us. We have student work in front of us. We're analyzing it to look at whether or not we have the same rigorous expectations. It also helps build that collective efficacy, and it also allows for us to share best practices. So professional learning communities are really one of the most essential parts of the way that we operate as an organization. The team goal setting, I mentioned that as well earlier, which is that our PLCs set collaborative goals together and measure those and monitor those as the year goes along, in addition to our individual teachers setting their own goals as well. Global outcomes. Our school district has identified that global outcomes are a really important part of how we want to develop our students as a whole. And you've probably heard about us talking about some of the innovative learning that's happening at our school. Within the area of global outcomes. Project-based learning is something that you've probably heard as well, PBL, project-based learning, or maybe even design thinking. And those are just two ways in which we can design learning for students that might be more engaging and that might be cross-curricular and allows for students to apply their learning in hopefully a real-world way. You've heard about some of our stuff around maybe trout in the classroom, or we have a beehive that we're working on here, and all of that is tied back to our standards, our academic standards at the state of Colorado, but then they also are embedded under and help support what we would call our global outcomes here too. Last year, for example, fifth grade spent a lot of their time focused on talking to the International Space Station, which was, of course, an incredible experience. And that's the ARIS project is what that was called, which was a partnership with our local amateur radio club and students that, in fifth grade, they're learning about space in the solar system. So there was an obvious connection there with literacy and math embedded within that. And that was all building towards our connection with the International Space Station, which of course we talked to. And hopefully, if you haven't seen that video, of course, I'd encourage you to, but that was just a fantastic experience for our kids there. So some great stuff happening with global outcomes. Just some, to kind of wrap up and then stop talking and kind of open up to questions and thoughts. There are some other considerations too that I did want to mention, which of course we've mentioned quite a bit. Over the past few years, of course, we've had COVID, which has impacted our learning environments, going in and out of school. We had fires last year where our community was evacuated. These are just all things that, of course, we're all aware of, but that have had impact on learning. And within all of that, I think that we have persevered to a very high level here at the elementary school, and for our growth, our data to be demonstrating that some of our curriculum and instructional adjustments are working, I think is a testament to that. But because of the stuff that has happened, we also know that there is, without question, an impact on the social emotional learning of our students and adults. without question. And, just recently I was looking at something, it was last week, an article coming up that came out of the Society for Neuroscience. And in there, they're talking about how our students have experienced our learning loss within social. So social emotional learning loss. We talk about our academic learning loss as we should, but social emotional learning loss, of course, has also happened. And so we're very aware of that. We have increase in our district, our counseling services throughout the district K-12, and we continue to focus on that. In addition to that, when it comes to social emotional learning loss, there's lots of research that supports the idea that the more physical fitness, the more physical activity that our kids can have, the better with regard to obviously their physical well-being, but also their mental and emotional well-being. One thing that we have done at the elementary school with regard to that is we have found a way this year for the first time to where all of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders get 8 to 10 minutes of physical fitness activity every single day. In addition to that, they get PE once every couple of days for 50 minutes. But what was happening is, and it's always been something we've tried to figure out, is it's important for the heart rate to get up every day as much as we possibly can. So at the intermediate grades, we've been able to figure out a way within our special schedule to where they all get their physical fitness, their physical activity going 8 to 10 minutes every day before they then go off to art and music and computer science and PE. So that's something that we are doing to ensure that we take care of the whole child as well, among other things. So just some next steps, like I said, we'll be getting input from the Colorado Department of Education this week, site visits coming up, a request to reconsider process. And those are some things that within that category of school performance framework and accreditation to keep in mind. So like I've said, we're really proud of where we are, and we continue to celebrate our successes. And we know that we're doing the right work, and we know we're making growth. The data is playing that out. We also know we're not there, and we need to continue to work even harder, which I know that we are doing and will do. So I talked a lot there, so I will see what kinds of questions everyone has or clarifications or thoughts.
This is Amanda. Thanks so much, John. My question is maybe higher level. So I know this is the first time I actually learned that every school does this plan submittal, regardless of, what category you happen to fall in. So I guess I thought originally it was more of a punitive thing. We had to do this unified improvement plan because of the status. But what are the advantages of, other than, having a great label, a much better category? What are the advantages of getting this classification changed, like, this year versus next year with additional data? Does it help free up your administrator time to focus on different things? Or could you just talk about why are we trying to change the status?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, well, so to begin with, the state really contacted us and said, you fall into this other category because your data looks pretty good. So, they started that conversation when they saw our Cmas data. Yeah, we were one of 11 schools that fell into that category. So they started that conversation. Then we had to ask ourselves, and we don't have to do this request to reconsider, as you're kind of, I think, alluding to, right? We had to ask ourselves, do we want to do this? Do we? And I think, I know that I felt like it's something that I want to do because it's kind of like something that's been hanging over us with regard to this status. Now, there's other ways that we measure learning, of course, that we certainly can demonstrate and do demonstrate that we're very successful in other ways. But the Cmas is something that is important to us. And we think, and the state accreditation is important to us. And I think it's important to our community as well. And so we feel like putting in the effort now for the state to look at where we are and look at our data will allow for us to, I don't want to say be recognized, because it's not, necessarily some prestigious recognition, but allow for us to really demonstrate that we have made the growth that we feel like we've made, and for that to be acknowledged at the state level. But I think kind of in that question, I think the implication is, why now? And I think we feel like, I believe that as a staff, it would feel better for us to shed this title that it, makes headlines throughout the community so that we can show that we are growing, or show that we still have a lot more work to do, whatever the end result is. So I guess that would be my thinking around it, if that answers your question.
No, that's really helpful. I
Amanda,
wasn't sure if
I
there
had
was,
that same question, and I actually, Ruby and I got on with the state and said, hey, can we just wait till the spring, or what, are we close enough to do this, right? And because if we go to this work, what is it really going to give us? And then if we fall off in the spring, what is it really going to give us? And we went through the whole process and filled out the sheets, and it was done at our level. We're not messing with the schools, or the teachers don't have to do anything or anything else, so they do what they're doing. And we found out, this looks pretty good. Let's recognize our teachers for the hard work they've done as soon as they can, if it's there, right? If it's not there, that's fine. If it is there, let's definitely make sure that let's find out that we are on the right path. And if we keep doing stuff with some adjustments and retweak our school improvement plan, we will get there. But I think it was really just to recognize all the hard work that our teachers had, because the data is there. So if the data is there, we want to present it, and it's really about whether they accept our version of how many kids took it, and are those tests there. The data is really there to show it, but we have to make up the difference and show other data of more kids that took other tests to show that we had enough kids take the test. We feel very confident. We really feel like, well, yeah, the kids that took the test are the kids that demographically, you say, that's important, and we have those kids that took the test. So we feel like we're very comfortable with our data, but whether it meets their guidelines or don't meet their guideline or not, it is great information to have, though, that we put it all in the chart. It'll all look very green, right, instead of red. So we're very happy, and again, it assures us that whatever with the path we are on, let's keep going and just improve it, because we don't have to make major changes right now, and we should do all right in the spring. I have all the confidence in the world that we'll do fine, and we'll keep the path of what's important to us, and what was important to us is making a difference. So I guess it's validation, honestly. And again, we're not asking our teachers to do different work or anything else. We're just really looking at the data and trying to present it in a good way. Definitely more work on Ruby and the principals and myself, but not on anyone else.
Right. Blake,
John,
I just want to say that I'm having a irregular internet connection. So if I should end up losing it, you can finish, okay?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how that'll look, but we can wing it.
No pressure, Blake, no pressure.
John, I wanted to thank you for presenting that. As a member of DAAC and in DAAC, we've talked about this for years. I've never seen it presented this way in such detail and as comprehensive as it is. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Blake.
I think the more our community can understand what all goes into this one term, from the state, they can better understand what that means and what it represents. I think hopefully this presentation at this level will help people to better understand that.
I do also want to say is that, the priority improvement was less than 0.5% of being in it versus not in it and everything else. We have identified all these strategies before we were in school improvement, and we're doing it K-12. We're doing it differently, and it's a sense of urgency, but we did not change what we knew our issues were because of priority improvement or not priority improvement. We, like I say, might increase the intensity of it. We might have done some things, but really we already had the plan in place before that ever came out. And we just followed that plan because we had already identified the areas we wanted to improve. And if we improve those areas, we should continue to improve and do better on the state test as well as what's important to us. So
it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it wasn't reactionary. It was more of a sense of urgency, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Any other questions for people or comments? Okay. I want to thank you all for being here. I think if there's nothing else, is there any other questions on anything else or comments?
I guess I want to ask on the Esser
Motion
funding.
to,
You're going to send this survey out, and Sheldon, you mentioned you needed some feedback, but within a certain time frame.
Yeah, I mean, if we have time, I mean, it wouldn't be hurt to have people look at the data. And so I might just send out like an invitation to the people who chose to off here. I wouldn't have like a special DAAC meeting or anything, but if everyone to come, that would be great. And I'd say, okay, this is what they're saying. They're saying, our community is saying this is the #1 priority. And this is what they mean. What do you guys, how are you interpreting that, or what are we going that? Just to make sure that, the data is being interpreted by different lenses.
Okay.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be a long thing. It should be, here's some basic things. Here's our narrative. And I'll probably write the narrative. This is what we're expecting to do and give feedback on all of it. Just won't be interpreting the data. It's like, this is how we interpret data. This is the narrative that I made. Is there anything we need to add, or does it make sense? So it'll be kind of the product that I want to send in. I'd like to have some other eyes on.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody? Well, thank you, Sheldon, and thank you, John. Appreciate that. And remember, this is recorded, and you will be able to view it again if there are certain parts of it that you want to review and take a look at. Okay, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn, please.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard somebody say yes.
I said second, sure.
Okay, all right, all in favor, thumbs up. Okay, again, thanks to all of you for your time. Thank you for engaging in your questions. Good discussion. That's important. Appreciate that a lot. Okay, all right, well, enjoy the rest of the evening, you guys.
Thanks, Bev.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.